Just like in a game Monopoly, when you land in jail and you have that get out of jail free card, which means you can get out of jail with no questions asked, no consequences, just get out of jail for free. Well, when a Jehovah's Witness starts to become curious about the religion, if they start to question the doctrine that always changes, hypocrisy, lies, corrupt things that go on in the organization, well, when a Jehovah's Witness starts to voice their concerns, they are met with these 5 get out of jail free cards, which basically allows the organization to keep lying to the members while the members are left feeling confused and gaslit. So I want to break down exactly how they use these 5 get out of jail free cards. And then I also want to show how if anybody is leaving the religion, they'll know how to answer these questions when they are basically confronted or tried or blocked by these get out of jail free cards. So the first one that they like to use is the Brothers Are Imperfect. Now, anyone that's been a Jehovah's Witness knows that the whole religion is based on the fact that what the governing body says is coming directly from God, and through the elders, basically the same thing. That whatever they say is coming from God. It's coming from the Bible, and because they prayed on Holy Spirit, that if you reject what the elders say, then you're rejecting God. And then they also like to use fear tactics. So they like to show examples how when people complained about God's prophets, that God considered that a rebuke against him. So based on them cherry picking these type of scriptures, the average Jehovah's Witness basically feels that whatever the elders say and ultimately the governing body says is coming directly from Jehovah. But what happens is that over time, when the average member starts to maybe see conduct from the elders that's questionable, something that maybe is highly disturbing that makes to start them a question, are these men really appointed by God? Then what people will say, not just the elders, but even anyone who you try to speak to about these issues, what they'll say when the elders do something questionable is, well, the brothers are imperfect. They're just doing the best that they can. And then they'll kind of gaslight you and kind of attack you and say, the brothers are not perfect. They're not, why are you expecting perfection? They're not perfect. But how this is confusing is that we're basically told we have to do whatever the elders say because it's coming from Jehovah. So then if we see action that suggests that maybe they're full of it, rightfully we're going to question whether or not they're really speaking from God. So when they say the brothers are imperfect, then it keeps the witness in that brainwash loop. Because the reason that they're listening to the elders is because they're saying whatever they say is from God. But then when you catch them doing something wrong, then it's, they're imperfect. Now the next get out of jail free card that they like to use is Wait on Jehovah. Now essentially what Wait on Jehovah is it's playing with the laws of averages. You see, sometimes things work themselves out, and sometimes things do not work themselves out. This has nothing to do with being a Jehovah's Witness. This is just the law of averages. So if it's something minor and it works itself out, they'll give credit and say, well, you see, you waited on Jehovah, and look, Jehovah took care of it. But what they don't talk about is the other 70% of the time when something does not get resolved. And then when you question it and you wonder, why is this issue not being resolved? That's when they'll gaslight you and say, well, it's on Jehovah's timetable. You're not waiting on Jehovah. Who are you to question Jehovah's timetable? So it kind of gets flipped around. But really what wait on Jehovah is if you're bringing up something that's extremely disturbing, questionable about the organization, wait on Jehovah is a way for them to get rid of you. hoping that the problem just goes away and you'll forget about it. That's a way that they don't really have to answer the question. They just tell you, well, you got to wait on Jehovah. And if you complain, then they'll just say you're not waiting long enough. You're not waiting patient. You got to be patient. It's Jehovah's timetable. It's actually a very clever way to basically just avoid the fact that there's some sort of injustice going on. Now, the third get out of jail free card that they like to use, and this takes it a step above wait on Jehovah. That is, leave it in Jehovah's hands. Now, leave it in Jehovah's hands basically means that whatever it is that you're questioning, they know it's wrong. They know there's no legitimate explanation for it. And they basically know whatever you're questioning, don't even expect anything's going to get done about it. That is their way of basically saying nothing's going to get done about it, just leave it in Jehovah's hands. Now, an example of leave it in Jehovah's hands is when Jeffrey Jackson of the governing body said under oath that they don't really believe they're the only appointed channel. And those of us who've been Jehovah's Witnesses know that that is exactly what they teach us. So that's an example of leave it in Jehovah's hands. Because any Jehovah's Witness that you question about that, most witnesses don't even believe he said that. They'll say it's an apostate lie and not even look at the transcripts that proves that this is an actual court document. But basically, if any Jehovah's Witness you speaks to knows that he really said that, that is an example where they'll use wait on Jehovah, because they already know nobody's going to do anything about that. Nobody's going to question the governing body, and nobody can explain why he said that. So what you'll get is, we'll just leave it in Jehovah's hands, which basically means they're pleading the fifth. They're just not going to answer the question, which makes it a very clever get out of jail free card. Now the fourth one is sometimes we get direction we don't understand. Now this is where it gets dangerous. You see, what Jehovah's Witnesses do in all their literature is they cherry pick Bible examples where people in Bible times, maybe they were confused and they didn't maybe understand the direction they got, or maybe they didn't understand why God was telling them to do something. So the witnesses will cherry pick all of these accounts in the Bible, and they'll justify them giving us direction they don't understand by pointing out random examples in the Bible where maybe people were confused. But they translate that into meaning that they can basically tell Jehovah's Witnesses anything they want to tell them, and all they got to do is say, hey, it doesn't matter if you understand it or not. Look at this example in the Bible. Now here's one example to just show how they do this. So this is the Watchtower. So this is the Watchtower of November 15th, 2013. And here's an example that they cherry picked. This article titled, 7 Shepherds, 8 Dukes, What They Mean for Us Today, whatever they're talking about. So in this article you'll find, and it's going to be on page 20, where I have highlighted. It says, elders who are reading this article can draw some useful conclusions. So notice they're already telling the elders you can draw these conclusions from this article. And this is some of the conclusions that they come up with. If you see right here where I have highlighted yellow, direction that we receive from Jehovah's organization may not appear practical from a human standpoint. Now, what does that even mean when you think about it? Direction that we receive from Jehovah's organization may not appear to be practical from a human standpoint. I mean, we're humans. So what does that mean? even from a human standpoint, basically do it anyway. But then it goes down, and where I have highlighted green, it says, all of us. So now they're talking about not just the elders, but all the members of the congregation. All of us must be ready to obey any instruction we receive, whether these appear sound from a strategic or human standpoint or not. So this is how it gets kind of dangerous, that this is what they do. They cherry pick these scriptures of Bible accounts where maybe people were confused, and then they come up with stuff like this, saying that you can conclude from studying this Bible example that basically, if we tell you something that doesn't even seem right from a human standpoint, do it anyway. Don't question that. And this is how you have problems like the Royal Commission. Think about maybe those elders that were involved in some of those cases, and they were told, don't report it. Well, you know, some of those elders probably felt something was not right about that. But you see, when they get instruction that basically tells them, even if we say something that doesn't even seem practical from a human standpoint, do it anyway, direction you'll understand. That's how you have situations like what happened with the Royal Australia Commission. Because witnesses are trained that whatever the elders say and whatever the organization says, that even if you don't understand it, do it anyway. And all they have to do is cherry pick a Bible account where somebody was confused and didn't understand anything and say, you see, look, they didn't understand, but sometimes you get direction you don't understand. And that's how it can be dangerous when they basically have their members brainwashed, where even if things don't even make sense to them, they're told, do it anyway. So the next get out of jail free card that they like to use is, look what King David did. Jehovah's Witnesses love what King David did. You see, what King David did was downright evil. First, he slept with another man's wife, but then when she got pregnant, he had the man murdered to cover it up. So that was definitely evil. I'm not saying David was evil, but that was an evil act. But what Jehovah's Witnesses do is they now use this as basically a get out of jail free card. So when maybe like the elders or maybe like something with the governing bodies, the stuff in Australia, anything really bad that someone in responsibility in an organization does, instead of concluding that maybe these people are not appointed by God as they say they are, or maybe this organization really isn't driven by God because of the actions of people, they'll use this. They'll say, well, look what King David did. God appointed him, and look, he murdered somebody. So they use this as an excuse anytime that somebody in an organization does something even evil. And this makes it a perfect get out of jail free card, because basically, if somebody does something that's not as bad as what David did, if they didn't go and murder somebody, then this is the perfect get out of jail free card. And this is also interchangeable with basically any other Bible accounts where somebody did something evil. They like to use the one with, I don't know if it was Eli's sons or if it was Aaron's sons, but somebody's sons at the tabernacle. They were basically doing all types of corrupt stuff, and sometimes witnesses like to use that example of Eli's sons. But the one with David is the one that they usually use the most, which again makes it a perfect get out of jail free card, because unless the elders commit murder, all they got to do is say, well, look what David did. But Jehovah was still using them. Now, this next card, I like to call this the wild card, the Joker. Basically, if you successfully rebuke all those other get out of jail free cards, you're not accepting the Brothers Are Imperfect, you're not going to wait on Jehovah for decades, you're not going to accept, leave it in Jehovah's hands, you're not going to accept direction you don't understand, and know what King David did is not an excuse for the actions of the elders. If you're basically on your way out the door and none of those other get out of jail free cards worked, as a bit of a joker, they would then turn around and say that the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. Now, I want you to really think about that. So, they're telling us that the governing body is not inspired. So, take a look at this Watchtower article that this comes from. So this is the February 2017 study edition of the Watchtower. So it says right here on page 26, under who really is the faithful and discreet slave, that the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. So what exactly does that mean? Well, they're basically saying that we're not inspired. Basically, where would you get that idea from? Right? Why would we as Jehovah's Witnesses come up with this crazy idea that they were inspired? And when you look at this picture on the right, this is just my opinion. If you look at these three brothers here, Sanderson, Splain, and Anthony Morris, I feel like they're laughing about it. Right? I feel like as they're taking this photo op for this magazine where they're trying to now gaslight us and tell us that we never said we're inspired, it looks like they're actually laughing at us. And this will basically really kind of make you start to lose your mind a little bit, because I don't know about you, but the only reason I was in this religion is because I thought that they were inspired. In fact, when I got baptized, the question that they asked me was something about, well, I can't even remember what the questions were, but basically, if they asked me when I got baptized, if one of the questions said, do I understand that the governing body is neither infallible or inspired? I would have said no. I don't understand that, and I wouldn't have got baptized, and I can honestly say that. The whole reason why we're in this religion is because they're inspired. When they tell a disfellowship person, or when they tell a mother that you can never speak to your disfellowship daughter again, the reason she listens is because she's thinking this direction is inspired. This is coming from God. The reason that Jehovah's Witnesses will actually be ready to die and not take a blood transfusion is because they're inspired. And some witnesses even died when they used to say you couldn't even take blood fractions. They died because they couldn't even take medication that was made from blood fractions. And that's because the governing body is inspired. The whole reason that Jehovah's Witnesses do whatever the governing body says is because they're inspired. So when you catch them in a lie, like when you catch them in a contradiction, or something like the generation prophecy, how they keep changing the meaning of prophecies and they get caught in hypocritical stuff, what they'll do is a wild card, as a final get out of jail free card, when you can prove that these men are not inspired by God. Then they gaslight you and turn around and say, we're not inspired, right? Like, where did you get that idea from? And they'll be able to quote and say, look, the February 2017, the governing body said they're not inspired. And you see how that can really keep Jehovah's Witnesses in this loop, because they think that the reason that they're doing all these things is because God appointed them and God is inspiring them. So when they turn around and say we're not inspired, it makes you go loopy, right? Like, why are you even in this religion if they're not inspired? But when I was putting together this information, I remember seeing a picture that showed that they were inspired. So I was up all night long, like trying to find this picture. I couldn't remember where I've seen it. I've seen it in multiple publications because sometimes they reuse the same picture. So I knew I seen a picture somewhere that was showing that they were inspired. And after maybe several hours of looking, I ended up finding this picture. So this is the picture that I remember seeing that showed that they're inspired. So you see right here on the right, Now I'm going to blow this up so you can see better what's going on. Oh, and by the way, so if anyone wants to look up this is the April 15th, 2013 Watchtower. You can find this in April 15th, 2013. And what you're going to see here is this is showing the only channel that Jehovah's using. This is what Jeffrey Jackson lied about at the Royal Commission when he said that they don't really believe they're the only channel. Well, this is illustrating that channel that they say that they're the only channel that God is using. And it has right here the list of the hierarchy. So what you see on number 1 right here, you see the governing body, and then they give their information verbally or electronically to the branch committee, which is number 2. Then the branch committee, either verbally or electronically, send it to the circuit overseer. The circuit overseer, number 3, he then verbally or electronically gives the information to the elders, number 4. Then the elders verbally or electronically give the information to the congregation, which is what you see here. And then the congregation now takes that information and preaches it door to door, which is what you see here, number 6. So we can see that this communication from number 1 all the way to number 6, that it's either they're verbally giving this information out or they're sending an email or something. But the question is, where's the governing body getting their information from? You can see the hierarchy, the way that it goes down, that the governing body passes it to the branch to the circuit overseer to the elders to the congregation to the public. So where are they getting their information from? Now I'm going to zoom in on that. So what is this picture showing? Now this looks like, I don't know if this is Jehovah or if this is Jesus sitting on a throne, but you see this is one of them, and you see all the angels and Jesus right here and Jehovah, and then the governing body's here. So if Jesus is not talking directly to the governing body verbally, if he's not calling them or sending them a text message or an email, then what is this picture showing? How is the governing body getting all of this spiritual food, they like to call it, to the congregation that's from Jehovah? Well, if you look at this picture clearly, they would have to be inspired. That's what this is showing. It is showing inspiration. It is showing that the governing body is being inspired by all of this up here, Jesus and the angels in heaven, and they're being inspired. And then it shows they then verbally pass the information down. So this shows that they're saying they're inspired. Who would look at this and not feel that this is what they're trying to say? And someone could be skeptical and say, oh no, they're just praying for Holy Spirit. This is not praying for Holy Spirit. If you look in their literature, there's lots of pictures you can find of people and even elders praying for Holy Spirit. You know, they'll be like at a desk, they'll have their Bible and they're praying. This is not just illustrating that they're praying for Holy Spirit. This is showing that they are inspired from heaven to give us direction. And this is why Jehovah's Witnesses do whatever it is the governing body says, because they're inspired. This is the message that they're sending us, that they're inspired. But you know, a lot of times, or a lot of people they're hearing these terms, these narcissistic terms like gaslighting, and some people might be confused on what gaslighting actually is. Well, this is the very definition of what gaslighting is. If somebody doesn't know how to explain gaslighting, just explain this to them. So here's that picture at the top that's clearly showing that they're inspired. But if you look at the bottom, this is a quote from the Watchtower, February 2017. So they're telling us in a Watchtower 2017, the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. So while they're telling us that, they're showing us that they are inspired. And they expect us to do everything they say that they're inspired. For example, I would be called an apostate by them because I'm questioning the governing body. Yet, at the same time, they're showing us that they're inspired. They expect us to follow direction we don't even understand, even from a human standpoint, do it anyway, while at the same time they're telling us the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. This is the example of gaslighting. Because gaslighting is when someone tries to make you think that your reality is not really reality. So the reality is that they're inspired, which is why they have this picture. But why the reality of Jehovah's Witnesses is that they are inspired, they're trying to tell you the governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. And the reason that they put stuff like that in articles is because it served as a get out of jail free card. That's the only reason why they put that. Because you see, if you can trap a witness in the corner and show them that they're making stuff up, the generation prophecy, it doesn't make sense because it's made up. The reason that they said you couldn't take blood fractions and then they changed it and said that you could is because you're making stuff up. They continue to make up prophecies. They continue to be wrong. They change their doctrine. They try to cover things up. So in the event that you're able to prove that these men are not inspired as a joker card, they'll turn around and say, we never said we were inspired. Where did you get that idea? Gaslighting. To send you back to square one. Because once they say that we're not inspired, well, that basically means that that's a get out of jail free card for any false doctrine that they teach. Automatically. We're not inspired. Meanwhile, they expect you to do everything that they say. And that's why I like to call this the Joker card. And again, as you see their faces here, as they took this picture for the February 2017, where they told you they weren't inspired, it looks like they're really just laughing at how stupid Jehovah's Witnesses are. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a negative term. I was stupid too. Because how could you be submissive to the point where they control your entire life and tell you all the time the council's from Jehovah, the elders are from Jehovah, and then turn around and tell you that we never said you were inspired, right? We never said we were inspired. Where did you get that idea? They know they're messing with us. Look at their faces. They know that they are basically really gaslighting everyone when they turn around and then try to say we're not inspired, when everything suggests that they are inspired. So this chart right here, this basically shows how the average Jehovah's Witness is trapped in this brainwash loop. Because if anyone starts to raise some questions, they're going to be met with one of these get out of jail free cards, no matter what the situation is. For example, I heard of a story where a Jehovah's Witness sister who was married, her and her husband were working at ward headquarters for a couple of months on a temporary project. And she told her father, who was an elder in the area I live in, how an anointed brother grabbed her butt on a project, and he was an anointed brother. I don't know if he was a governing body member or just some random other brother, like maybe a governing body helper, or I don't know who it was. But she said this anointed brother grabbed her butt. And when I heard the story, I was thinking, wow, and she's not doubting that this is the true organization. And her father, who's an elder, was saying that, it's just imperfection. So here it is, she's at ward headquarters that's supposed to be God's house. Some anointed brother grabs her butt, even though that she's married. But that falls under get out of jail free card number one. Oh, they're just imperfect, right? Or that could also be used under number 5. Look what King David did. And let's say, for example, that, or let's go to the Australia Royal Commission. Why were they covering stuff up? Well, point number 4. Sometimes we get direction you don't understand, right? Or they could say leave it in Jehovah's hands. So when a Jehovah's Witness starts to wake up, he's going to get trapped. If he tries to speak out, they're going to use these get out of jail free cards to try to keep you in. So now I just want to explain from a logical standpoint, if you're trying to wake up, or if you're waking up to the Jehovah's Witness religion and you start to want to ask these questions and you're going to be met with these get out of jail free cards, I'm going to show you how to reason with these to break out of that brainwash loop. So the first one, the brothers are imperfect. Think about it like this. When a mother is told that she can never speak to her disfellowshipped daughter again, she's told that that direction is coming from Jehovah, right? It's direction from Jehovah. They're even told that by shunning a disfellowshipped person, you're showing loyalty to Jehovah. So you have a lot of parents that will never speak to their children again because they're told that local elders that disfellowshipped them, that decision was from Jehovah. So then how can they turn around when it's convenient for them and then try to say, oh, they're just imperfect men doing the best they can? Well, if they're just imperfect men doing the best they can, then why is it that when a person gets disfellowshipped, I mean, wouldn't the parents have a better idea of whether or not their child is repentant than the judicial committee? So if they're just imperfect men doing the best they can, it should be up to us if we want to shun somebody. But we're told we have to shun the person because what the elders say, it's from Jehovah. Jehovah was behind that judicial committee. So don't just accept this get out of jail free card when they try to say the brothers are imperfect. Because if they're imperfect, then we shouldn't have to do whatever they say when it comes to even shunning someone's own children. And another thing about them supposedly being imperfect is that we never said they were perfect. They're the ones that are essentially saying that they are perfect by saying what they say is from God. We know the elders are not perfect. Anyone that's gone to Kingdom Hall for, say, more than 6 months, not being rude, but we know the elders are not perfect. Many of them don't even have an education. Nobody thinks those men are perfect. They are setting themselves up by being perfect, saying what we say is from God, and if you disobey us, you're disobeying God. So when it's convenient for them, they'll say that it's from God in order to control you. But then when they get caught in some corrupt conduct that reveals they're not from God, then they try to gaslight and say, oh, they're imperfect. You can't have it both ways. Either what they say is from Jehovah or it's not. Now, the second get out of jail free card that they'll try to stop you with is we'll wait on Jehovah. Well, think about 1975. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses were smart enough who lived through that they left the organization then, but a lot of them stayed in. So those Jehovah's Witnesses in 1976 who lost their houses and everything, they were probably told, wait on Jehovah, right? Jehovah sees everything, in due time, wait on Jehovah. Well, we're in 2023. That was almost 50 years ago. So are they still waiting on Jehovah? Well, what's actually going on? Well, what's going on is that the organization has taken that time to try to lie about 1975. They're trying to say, we never said that. So is that what waiting on Jehovah means? Does it mean that basically give them time to wait so long till now they're going to try to gaslight you even further and say that, we never said anything about 1975? Wait on Jehovah is really just an excuse to kind of shut you up, and they have time to hope the problem just goes away or cover it up. I mean, wait on Jehovah could work on something simple, but if you're questioning something doctrinal and they simply say, well, wait for Jehovah, well, look how 1975 turned out. Now, if they use the get out of jail free card, leave it in Jehovah's hands, number 3, this one, of course, should be rejected immediately. So I bet during the Royal Commission, if you go back before that, when people were being sexually abused by even some elders, and, the elders were told, don't report these things. They asked the victims not to report all that stuff that was going on. I'm sure that people back then were told, get out of jail free card number 3, leave it in Jehovah's hands. Well, how did it get into the hands of the Royal Australia Commission? Was Jehovah holding it in his hands so long that he forgot it was in his hands and it fell out of his hands and it fumbled into the Royal Commission? The Royal Commission is a perfect example of why leaving in Jehovah's hands is dangerous. That is just an excuse for people to know that something is seriously wrong with this organization, and they don't want to accept it, so they just say, we'll leave it in Jehovah's hands. Well, clearly, the Royal Commission is not in Jehovah's hands anymore, and it did not turn out good for Jehovah's Witnesses. So that is not a good excuse to simply just say, we'll leave it in Jehovah's hands. Anything if you're questioning a serious doctrinal issue, don't accept leave it in Jehovah's hands. Demand answers and demand something to get done about it. And then the fourth get out of jail free card that a person may be hit with is sometimes we get direction we don't understand. Well, just think about all the times the organization has been wrong, right? In 1975, people sold their houses, they quit their jobs. People died because they were told you couldn't even take blood fractions. And after people died, then they changed the doctrine and said, well, you can't take blood fractions now. When you have an organization that is making those kind of mistakes and changing doctrine that often, if they say something like, even if we give you direction you don't understand, follow it anyway, I would not take any direction that these people say if you don't understand it. And you could even end up getting in some sort of legal trouble. Think about all those elders during the Royal Commission that were told direction you don't understand, don't report it, burn records, stuff like that. And I just want to say that I have a personal experience where I was at a Kingdom Hall that was the whole hall was being done over. They were going to gut the whole thing and rebuild the whole thing from the inside out. And maybe like a week before the project started, I was out in service with a couple of other members, and an elder came to the hall, and he went up in the attic, an attic that I didn't even know how like there was access to the attic. And he kind of thought it was funny, but he ran up kind of an attic, and he came back down with this big briefcase, and he made a joke kind of like, oh, I hid these records up here years ago and I forgot about it. So he was kind of worried that when he knew that the whole building was going to get gutted, that, he was going to lose the records or someone was going to find him. But I seen this with my own eyes. I seen this elder go up in the attic and retrieve a briefcase that was hidden in the attic. What was that? And back then I didn't question it because I was in this brainwashed loop. I thought it was kind of strange, like, why are they hiding a briefcase in the attic? America's not a country where Jehovah's Witnesses are banned, so I don't see any reason, if you're in America, why a Kingdom Hall would have records hidden in the attic somewhere when there's no legal restrictions on Jehovah's Witnesses. But that's just an example of like elders getting direction they don't understand. So if the organization is telling you to burn records and not report things, and first they tell you can't take blood fractions and people die, then they say you can. These people have lost their credibility. How can you take direction that you don't understand from an organization that's made that many mistakes and involved in some sort of criminal stuff? Now, the fifth get out of jail card that they're going to use is, look what King David did. Well, if somebody says, look at what King David did, what you could say to them is, look at the punishment King David got. King David was severely punished. I mean, I'm not questioning God, but, the son that he bore with Bathsheba got killed. God took his life. I mean, that seems kind of harsh, right? There was no question that King David got severely punished. Publicly humiliated. Everybody knew what he did. Jehovah exposed it. He got severe punishment. But when Jehovah's Witnesses use this as an excuse for the conduct of the elders or the governing body, they're not talking about situations where these people are being severely punished. The organization tries to cover things up. Think about what's going on with Brother Morris right now. So Who knows what he did, but they quietly removed him from the governing body. They're slowly trying to take his videos off of jw.org because they're hoping that Jehovah's Witnesses don't know that he's slowly being removed. Then they relocated him to North Carolina. Nobody knows what's going on or what he did or what he's involved in. And they buy him a new house. They buy him property. Somebody online had like the public information showing that the Watchtower purchased his house. That's what the organization does. They don't handle things how God handled King David. And with King David, God exposed publicly what King David did. It was no mystery. Nobody knows what's going on with Brother Morris and other situations like that in the organization. So if they try to say, well, look what King David did, well, be clear that King David was severely punished and it was exposed. Jehovah didn't cover up what King David did and try to hide it. King David himself did that, but Jehovah exposed it. And that is not what you see when they use this get out of jail card saying, well, look what King David did, so brother so-and-so, it's okay what they did because look what King David did. It's not the same thing. And just for the record, for anyone who's a Jehovah's Witness watching this, telling somebody that you lost your privilege to comment during a Watchtower study, that's not a real punishment. Deleting someone as an elder is not a real punishment. In a Jehovah's Witness world, you're punished. That's not real punishment. King David was severely punished, so that get out of jail card is void. That's not an excuse for corrupt stuff in an organization and what King David did. Now, if you successfully get past all these get out of jail free cards, and as a wild card, they send this last one to you. The governing body is neither inspired nor infallible. So now you've gone in a complete loop, right? Because now when you expose the fact that they're not inspired, they turn around and say, we never said that we were inspired anyway. Where did you get that idea? So if somebody uses that wild card on you and say, oh, the governing body, well, they said they're not inspired. Well, show them this picture and just ask them and say, well, what does this picture look like to you? Right? Where are they getting, how are they getting their information from? If they're not inspired, what does this look like? And then you can ask them, if the governing body is not inspired, then why is it that we do everything they say as if they were inspired? And that's a fair question to ask, because if they're not inspired, we're giving our whole entire life to these people. We're doing everything that they say, even when it's flat out dangerous. We're being told, even if we give you direction you don't understand, do it anyway. Why are we following everything they say as if they're inspired if they're not inspired? So clearly the subliminal messaging from the organization is that they are inspired. And the only reason that they wrote that article is just to gaslight you when you confront them with it. So I hope that this was helpful for anyone who is thinking about leaving the organization. If you try to voice your concerns, you're going to be met with these get out of jail free cards. And when they try to use these gaslighting tactics on you, do not let them pass go. Do not let them collect $200 and send them directly to jail.